Good morning. We are live. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historical shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area. We recognize these original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda for today? Councillor Danielson and Councillor Barry. Already signed. Okay. Go ahead.
By Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Dayu, be it resolved that the April 7th, 2021 council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. There's mayor's remarks coming up, so just bear with me. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none. Yes, so there's the first mistake of the day, and I'm sure there'll be a few more gaffes as we go along. This, of course, as we know, is our first meeting in person in 2 years. I think we're all a little discombobulated. Obviously, evidently I am as well. So it'll take some getting used to. We also have a new AV system and microphone, so we need to be attentive to pressing the little button so the red light comes on. So we will all forgive ourselves for the mistakes we are about to make through the day. But welcome back. It's nice to see faces in person. May I, see, I'm going to do it again. You have to bear with me. Adoption of the minutes.
By Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that the March 17th, 2022 regular council and public meeting minutes be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Yes, this will take some getting used to. No public meetings, no delegations. We are going straight to Parks, Rec, and Trails business, and we will bring in Mr. Card on the big screen. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
We've got a couple of things for you. First up is your report for the bid award for Lower Fletcher Lake Landing.
That's right. So at the last meeting, Council received information on the results of the RFP for this project. We did only get one bid, and it was over the anticipated budget. So we elected to cancel that call and enter into negotiations with that bidder, which we have been able to successfully achieve. Today, you'll see attached the agreement from them, looking for support from council to enter into that agreement. $51,000 would be the total for Tulloch Engineering, with anything over and above, which was noted previously in the RFP requirements, up to $17,000 would be charged as time and materials only if they were required, whereas in the previous contract, it would have been a set cost there. So looking for support or any thoughts or feedback from council.
Thank you. Does council have any comments or questions for Chris? No, go ahead.
By Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved that council receives report PRT 1022 bid award for Lower Fletcher Skin Lake Landing submitted by Chris Card dated April 7th, 2022. And the council authorizes entering into an agreement with Tulloch Engineering for project management and consulting services for the cost of $51,000, with provisional items being charged on a time and materials basis if required to an upset limit of $17,000. And further, the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the noted agreement.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up for you, Chris, is the property owner survey results. This is our first try at our new process for getting public input for issues that may need to be aware of. So take it away.
That's right. So as council is aware, we did have this survey posted, and we ended up receiving 19 responses, a number through mail and a number through the online system. I must say that I feel this has been a very worthwhile exercise. A lot of great feedback has come through the the survey that is going to help inform some of the conversations that I'm going to be able to have with the consultant at our initial site meeting. And it seems like a lot of great input and just general people being thankful about this process. So I do think it's worthwhile. What I've done here is there seem to be some general themes behind all of the responses that we received, and I've done my best to group them into what I've put as the discussion items with recommendations attached to them. I've also attached to this part of the report all of the survey responses. We just tallied them up on the survey so that people's information was removed from them. So I'm happy to go through each recommendation or just look for some thoughts and discussion from council on how to proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, we've read the report, so I think I would just go straight to council to ask any questions on a specific section if they have any. Councillor Danielson.
I'm happy with the recommendations that Chris is making. Looks like we do have to have a discussion about questions that had options given to us, but otherwise I'm happy with his recommendations.
Yeah, thank you. And I see some nodding heads, so that's good. And you want an answer from us for item number 8, which is the what the sign should say. And I should have asked this before. The OP calls it Lower Fletcher. Yeah, Madam CAO.
Yes, and that is what the OP says. And ironically, actually, yesterday when I was going through some old files regarding a different issue, I came across some council minutes that referenced that lake, and it was Lower Fletcher Lake at that time. So
yeah, I find it interesting and good that people are interested in having some similarities. There's lots of names that have lots of lakes that have 2 names, and there's lots of lakes, as we've learned through the new lake layer on the heritage mapping site, that there's some lakes that have 7, 8, 9 iterations of themselves. So I wouldn't want us to have to get into acknowledging all of the names, which would be in keeping with our commitment to truth and reconciliation. But I think we need to be careful not to cross those waters, because those lake acknowledgements for historic names are in the heritage mapping. So we've done that work there. So I guess the question for council is, do you want to say Lower Fletcher, as it says in the report, and bracket Skin, or to say Lower Fletcher? That's the question that's being asked. I'm going to go to Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one, because I've heard property owners on the lake refer to both as adamant passion as their neighbor who refers to the other. So, and also this lake doesn't have a cottage association on it where we could sort of put the question to them. So I'm interested to hear what other members of council have to say. I certainly would want to keep any First Canadian link in recognition of that. But I'm open to hear what other council members have to say, for sure.
Thoughts from others? I think Deputy Mayor Liz, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think given the information you've given us about the layers of mapping and that the information is available, I personally would like to see us go with the official name and just stick with that, rather than, kind of for anybody new, it's kind of confusing. And I just think we should go with Lower Fletcher.
Now we may hear from the Mayor of Skin Lake. He might have something to say about that. Councillor Shortreed.
I agree with Councillor Dayu. It's probably 50-50 of who uses what name. Do Skin Lake or Lower Fletcher. So for the sake of everybody having the same name, I agree with using both.
So you're saying the opposite of Deputy Mayor Danielson. You want to say Lower Fletcher bracket Skin.
Yes.
So then how would you propose other lakes that have historically been known as sort of 7 or 8 iterations? Like we can't acknowledge every use.
But currently, even there's road signs, Skin Lake Road.
That's true.
Right? So we drive by and the first road is Skin Lake Road. And then you get, and it's Lower Fletcher. So it gets confusing when you've got road signs that say Skin Lake and a landing that says Lower Fletcher.
That's a good point. Go ahead.
I just know, for example, a lake that's very close to that area, which is Hardwood, we call it Hardwood. It is also called Clinto Lake.
Mhm.
So there are many, many, many lakes like that in the county, actually, that go by two different names. So I think we just need to be careful of changing it for one and not all.
Yeah, that's my concern. That's why I suggested, as I think the CAO had suggested, that we just stick with what's in the official plan. The official plan lake name is Lower Fletcher. So it's in keeping with documentation. But this week, what we can do is make sure that the museum folks who are working on the lake name layer of the heritage mapping program, there's lots of fodder there to make sure we don't lose those names, whether they're First Canadians or locally known lakes. And I mean, it sounds a bit of a silly discussion, just call it something, but it's really important to people. Their identities are linked to what they call their lake. So if we have to make a decision without going down a slippery slope of never-ending signage changes, it might be better just to stick with the OP, which is what you're suggesting. So thoughts from councillors Dayu or Barry? Councillor Barry.
I mean, I don't, it doesn't really express how much of an impact this would be. Like, would this just be on the signage at the lake? Or how many signages does it mean? Like, personally, I think having it in brackets, I support that, especially if some people are referencing it as one lake and the other. To lose that reference, I sort of support keeping it in brackets. That would be where I sit.
Councillor Dayu.
It's a tricky one because I do appreciate that there are other lakes with 4 or 5 or 6 different names. But I also rather support keeping both. I wonder, is this something that we could put back to the residents to get their sense on?
Well, we've already asked them. Chris, is there, and I have the survey open in front of me, but instead of me trying to flip through, that wasn't a question on the survey. Do you have any sense of what would be the best course of action? Do you believe that this sign and others in the future should say the 2 names or just the one? Lots of lakes only have 1 current name.
Yeah, and no, it's not a question that's on the survey. Of all the questions that were on the survey, this is actually the only thing that had people take the time to phone and have a chat with me. And I had 2 conversations, each of which was very passionate on one side or the other. One resident expressing that they strongly feel that the Skin Lake name should be held on to and that the Lower Fletcher Lake name should be completely eliminated. And I had another impassioned conversation for the exact opposite. So regardless of which decision, I think that some people are going to feel that they weren't heard and some people will feel that they were. It is confusing, and it was confusing even for me as staff first learning about these names, because as you hear about them and several lakes in that area, it takes a little while to come to the understanding that they have various names. I certainly think that the idea of the possibility of somebody in EMS being confused about where they're going because their phone or their dispatcher's telling them Lower Fletcher Lake, they're showing up and the signs say Skin Lake is the biggest risk we face with the signage. Given the 2 conversations I had, I probably think that listing both, one in brackets, would meet everybody's desires.
Okay, so I think what we need to be careful of is that we don't open up a giant naming can of worms here, but I think the EMS issue is important. We're never going to lose Lower Fletcher because that's in the OP. So in terms of what name has primacy in these situations, it would seem to me then that the name that's in the OP, that's in the OP should be the formal name. And if there is a current second name, like Hardwood and Clinto or Peach and Kabakwa, ones that we know are currently, I'm not going to say hotly debated amongst property owners, but that are referred to by both. And then we can make sure we are acknowledging all the First Nations iterations on the heritage mapping site. I just don't want to have to, I don't want to get into, maybe it's a project for the future when the heritage mapping work is done, but acknowledging those First Nations names in a project through the Heritage Committee or the Cultural Committee some other time. But for today's purposes, what I'm hearing is based on the OP in these situations, we need to remember it would be a going forward thing too, that what name is on the OP and then the opposite name or the colloquial name in brackets beside for now. Would that be suitable to all? Councillor Dayu?
Yeah, I do like that idea. And I'm thinking about the cultural committee, there is the signs subcommittee, and at public landings, that might be a really nice
Yeah.
place to commemorate all of the different names and a bit of the history there. So we could probably tick those boxes pretty simply with that committee.
Yeah, I think that touches on all the things that we want to do, that we as a council have committed to do, and also serves residents and emergency response. So that would be the answer there, that I'm not sure which option that is in the report. B. Anything further on this issue? Okay, go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved, council receives report PRT 1122, Lower Fletcher Skin Lake Landing Property Owner Survey results as submitted by Chris Card and dated April 7th, 2022. And the council directs staff to proceed with option B for item number 8 in the said report for lake name signage, and further council directs staff to proceed with the recommendations outlined in the said report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is the report for the waiving of landfill fees.
Yes, so attached to this report is the letter of request from the KLCA. They're undertaking a similar project to what was done several years ago by the Hawk Halls Lake Association to remove abandoned floating docks from their waterways. And they're requesting council's consideration of waiving of the landfill fees. What I've done in this report is looked back to what the previous decisions were at the Hawk Halls Lake project, as well as costs associated with if we were to go ahead and waive the fees. So looking for council's feedback on that.
Thank you. Yeah, to your comments, we did have an extensive discussion about this for the previous request and landed where we did. Looking for thoughts from council on the matter. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
It's kind of difficult because we did talk about a similar request previously and denied that request. And I do believe that we need to be consistent. At the same time, though, it seems to me that it might be an idea for us to investigate ways that we can assist. To me, this is like an environmental issue. There's volunteers working on the lake. They're bringing material to the landfill that's not their material, that it's somebody else's. I just would like us to look at maybe establishing some kind of program that would acknowledge, even if we're just giving reduced fees, or there's only a specific day when they can bring, the material to the landfill. And I know that it raises all kinds of questions, but I'd like either staff or the committee or someone to maybe take a look at what we can do going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly put that back to staff to have a look. We don't have a program. I think one of the concerns would be being able to provide equitable access to such a program to everybody. So is it only lake associations, or are we just going to waive, and I'm being a bit sort of devil's advocate, we're going to waive fees for disposal of docks for everybody, and under what criteria? What are the parameters? How decrepit does it have to be? Who makes that judgment call? We don't burn at landfills, so it's not like you can bring your old dock to the landfill and it'll get burnt. So I think there's a lot of questions. If a lake doesn't have an association, and again, what about sort of just the regular person who has an old dock? I mean, I do know just down here in the bay, there's an old dock that I'd love to get rid of, but as you know, I'm not going to do it. So who's going to do it? So we can ask. It's up to council. We can ask staff, maybe find out if there's other similar programs happening in other communities and how they're working, and do that sort of community comparator, which is quite common. Looking for thoughts, Councillor Dayu.
Thanks. Yes, I agree with Deputy Mayor Danielson. I'd really like to see how the municipality can support this. It's community groups getting together to improve our environment, to clean up, to do something that should have been done by individual property owners, but wasn't. And we are part of that broader community. The question is how. And I think the danger, which I believe we touched upon last time we discussed this, is would that in some way create a precedent, not a precedent, but some sort of expectation that, well, if I don't like my old dock, I just let it go, I'll let it float down the bay, and eventually someone will pick it up and I won't have to go through the hassle and the cost of getting rid of it. So I would like to put back to staff what we might do. I think what Liz says is right. You know, as a program going forward, how can we be a part of the solution? And I wonder if we even have the jurisdiction for something like, and Councillor Shortreed and I discussed this very recently about this request. If either the township or more likely the cottage associations would consider instituting a rule wherein you've got to number your dock in paint with your fire number, so that A, it's just a little bit easier for water access, fire or emergency response to find you. But B, if your dock does go walkabout, either by default or, you know, out of, I won't even say people would do it on purpose, but in case people just let it go walkabout, that there is someone who can be held responsible for that. That in fact, this is your dock and it's up to you to remove it from where it is and pay that fee, so that it doesn't always fall back onto the community. So those would be my thoughts too.
Yeah, and I think like in theory, it's a great idea. I remain skeptical in terms of the application of it. You know, there are for every 8 or 9.5 really good people who would go and retrieve their walkabout dock, there are in fact some who would just let it go and think somebody else will take care of it, and that's unfortunate. We also need to have a look at the cost, because it could be quite substantial. So it would have to be a difference between abandoned docks versus I just want to get rid of my dock. If you want a new dock, then you have to pay to replace your dock and dispose of your old one. So that's where we're at, to your point, is who, are people going to just let them go? So I would suggest to council, and a review of that is not going to happen tomorrow, next week, or next month. That'll be months in the making, because staff already have a lot of projects. So I would suggest that the request today, as in the report, the answer is still no, in keeping with the previous decision, until or unless such time as a new program is suggested and adopted by council, and there's no timeline on that at all. Would that be the way to go? And I think it is important. I mean, the environment committee isn't meeting right now because of the just getting back in order, and that group might have some input on that. So is that suitable? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Absolutely suitable. I just wanted to mention that Councillor Barry had an idea that one of the things that could be investigated is something similar to our hazardous waste day. It'd be dock disposal day, that it would limit the ability of people to just, whenever they're replacing their dock, to bring it in. It would have to be kind of like an organized function and only take place at a certain time. Just it was a thought, and I thought it was a good one.
Yeah, I think any of these, all these ideas are worth exploring, and not unlike, I would imagine that not unlike bringing in a boat, it's incumbent upon the owner of the thing to dismantle it to the point that it's disposable. You wouldn't just bring in the dock and think that the township's going to take off the drums and the boat cleats and the rubber bumpers and all of that. That's not like in such a day as a disposal day. So lots of food for thought. I think there's been some notes taken there. So in terms of the request that's before us today to do, we're just assuming that would be, they're thinking of doing this year, that in keeping with the report, that council is still supportive of the decision that was made prior, which is to deny this request at this time until or unless a program is put in place to provide equitable access to some form of program to all. I'm hearing. I think. Go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that council receives report PRT 1222 Request for waiving of landfill fees from Quagga Lake Cottagers Association, KLCA, submitted by Chris Card and dated April 7th, 2022, and that council concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and declines the KLCA's request for the waiving of landfill fees.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Card.
Thank you.
Public Works business is next, so we'll bring in Mr. Thorne. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, everyone.
First up for you is mulching head. Sounds like a band, but go ahead.
Yeah, so as the report discusses, we did bring that forward into budget for the cost of the machine. Excuse me. So through further investigation and cost estimating, we found that there's only one dealership for this type of machine. Everyone else that can supply this mulching head has to buy it from the dealer. So we would like to directly go to the dealer for the purchase and not go to a proposal or a tender option.
Okay, thank you. And as noted in the report, we have, I think, all members of council at some time have received some pretty high anxiety calls. The current head that we use really does a lot of damage, and it's really unsightly. Now, we all know that, blink and in the next season, there's a lot of greenery that fills in. We did have a situation last year where I received a complaint where the nature of the head that we have now had actually strewn some pieces that were embedded in somebody's lawn, and that's a safety issue, and we don't want to put people through that. So this is coming forward now. This should be a kinder, gentler mulching head, if there can be such a thing, when you're undertaking this work. So thoughts from council on the request to replace it and to single source it to get what we want. I see nodding heads. Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dennison, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, council receives report PW 1122 regarding equipment purchase mulching head submitted by Adam Thorne dated April 7th, 2022. The council hereby concurs with the recommendations made in the said report and authorize single source purchase of the Tagger mulching head from Cowboy Equipment in the amount of $30,000 plus applicable tax and to be funded from the Public Works Reserve.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up for you is addressing storage challenges.
Yes, through you, Mayor. As you know, we're growing, not just Public Works, but all departments within the municipality, and we're all struggling for increased storage, increased secured storage. So what I would like to propose is that we purchase 2 of these storage containers that are movable. We can move them around the site as needed as we grow, and then to have purchased 2 of them, have them delivered, and one set up at the Kawagama Lake Yard and one set up in what we call our lower pit, which is just down off of North Shore Road. I have spoken with the planner, and they would be allowed on our sites. And I have also spoken with bylaw to ensure that we would get a permit and have everything up to par.
Thank you for that. Thoughts from council? It's not a lot of money, but it's not in the budget, whereas the previous item was. And they're storage containers, which we have a bylaw against. So just looking for thoughts on how council feels about addressing this situation in this way. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Recognizing that storage containers or shipping containers are mobile and can be moved around the site. I see the value in that. And it's kind of difficult to look at a request right after we passed our budget, asking for, something that hasn't been budgeted, but acknowledging that it's a problem, then we need to deal with it. But I do have an issue with the shipping containers. I really do. We don't allow them in other areas. The pictures that have been supplied are of actual sheds or metal buildings. I'd rather see us pursue, something like a Quonset hut or a metal building rather than shipping containers. I just have a problem with that. And I'm assuming that shipping container, because it refers to shipping containers, and then in the recommendation, it calls them construction bins, I think, and I'm assuming that's the same thing.
That's correct.
Storage containers.
Because I see construction bins as being open topped and shipping containers as being
Oh,
closed.
so it's, yeah, it's referred to as, they're referred to actually as storage containers and then construction containers. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah.
Anyway, I do have a bit of a problem with the shipping containers.
Okay, thoughts from other members of council on how to approach this? I would ask Adam, if the containers, as noted earlier, it's not a lot of money, but they are containers. Presumably then to build a building, I already know the answer, but I'm asking it anyway, would be significantly more with construction materials costs the way they are.
Yes, and for right now, the idea is just to try to get some quick, secure storage to get items out of the weather, out from being inside or being outside and then stored away where we can lock them. We do have a lot of plans, as you know, for building the new shop down here on North Shore Road. So without being able to dive right in and know exactly what the site is going to look like 100%, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to try and build something permanent until the new shop is built and once the ground works is all completed. This is giving us a quick and efficient way to securely store items.
Yeah, so you raise a good point there. I had wondered too about the wisdom of creating something in the yard here at the Stanhope yard when that there's going to be a construction of a public works garage at some point. Would council support either one or both of these containers for the immediate need, knowing that they are not unlike we allow for the public, that they're temporary based on a construction project that will happen in the future? And that way there could be some planning and budgeting for proper buildings going forward. That would be an option too. It might take a number of years to, as we've done in the past for a lot of years, is take a number of years to accumulate the money to build something. At least then the current need would be addressed in a temporary fashion. Because I don't disagree with you about the containers. It's kind of do as I say and not as I do. But the public is allowed to have containers for short-term purposes. So if council would prefer, and I've only heard from Deputy Mayor Danielson so far on the merits or not of shipping containers permanently, then we could allow them for now, knowing that with a commitment going forward that buildings will be built when the appropriate location is found at the Stanhope yard. And I believe there is an appropriate location already at the Cogama yard. So thoughts on that, Councillor Barry?
I think I have a bigger issue with the fact that it's, like you said, do as we say, but not as we do. And I know that it says here, and notwithstanding the provisions of section 4.36, there is areas where they can be existing. And would either of these areas fall into that? Yeah, I guess that's a question more than a comment.
Move your hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, in Adam's report, he has indicated that he's talked to the planner and they are permitted in those zones. Yes.
And so we're still at the idea of, but they are containers and do we want to be the township that has containers? Do we want to be the township that has buildings? And where does your loyalty lie in terms of an efficient provision of a service, a storage service now versus it in the future? So the question still remains, if council wants to support the containers, is it once and done, or is it with an eye toward building buildings as reserves are accumulated to construct them? That's kind of what I've been asking. So looking for answer on that. Councillor Shortreed.
I'm in favor of temporary secured containers until buildings can be.
Over a longer term, like give it a couple of years to accumulate some resources to do that.
It's a secure part that. Some more secure, valuable.
Mhm.
items.
Yep, fair enough. Thoughts from other members of council? Councillor Barry.
I maybe sit on the other side of the fence. I think it's a good
example of how sometimes financial needs outweigh emergency needs. And I support the containers, especially in this situation where there's items of value that need to be secured. And I don't necessarily have that tied into why I support that. It's not a case of I support it as only temporary. I do support it as a need, and financially, I think if it can fit in where we've agreed that they can be, that's where I support that.
So just have the containers where they need to go and just leave them there.
Yeah, if they fit where they've already been recognized, they can be. Like, we're not saying you can put it in front of your lakefront view,
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so looking to wrap this up, Councillor Dayu.
I would be supportive of that if we are not looking to give ourselves an exception to our own rule, and it sounds like we are not. So in that sense, I am in favor. I think visually we should be looking for aesthetic beauty where we can, even for the comfort of staff, knowing that they're working in a lovely environment rather than in a very industrial looking environment. So I think my personal preference would be some sort of movable building that when we do go to build larger buildings, we can put them somewhere else and repurpose them. But if that's not a feasible option for right now, then I would support what is being proposed. Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like I'm hearing a yes, except for Liz. But you've been, that's fine. I mean, you've been adamant against, even when there's been applications to have shipping containers, you've voted no every time. So you're staying in line with your philosophy, which is fine. Okay, go ahead, please.
By Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that council receives report PW 1222 regarding the purchase of storage containers submitted by Adam Thorne dated April 7th, 2022, and that council hereby concurs with the recommendations made in the said report to purchase 2 secure construction containers through the request for quotation process in the amount of $8,500 for engineering fees of $1,700 plus applicable tax, and to be funded from Public Works Equipment Reserve.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Excuse me. Next up for you is the monitoring, but is Melissa coming in for that? Okay, we're going to have Melissa Murray come in for the monitoring and annual reporting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning, Melissa. You have a report on the environmental monitoring for us.
Yes, so this is just looking at options for continuing a required environmental monitoring. That's the annual monitoring and sampling of our waste disposal sites.
It seems to make sense. Certainly the company has been with us so long that it doesn't require getting a new person to come up to speed with all of our complications. Thoughts from council, questions, comments, concerns on this recommendation? Seeing none, go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dennison. Be it resolved, council receives report PW 1322, environmental monitoring and annual reporting as submitted by Melissa Murray dated April 7th, 2022. And council concurs with the recommendation to proceed with single source procurement of the environmental monitoring and annual reporting services from Cambium Inc. And that a bylaw to authorize the signing of the agreement be tabled at the next regular meeting of council.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Next up, again for you, Melissa, is the update on the Dorset Lions Club return program.
Thank you, Mayor. So we the agreement we have with the Dorset Lions Club for use of space at the Dorset transfer station has conditioned it that the agreement has to be renewed or reviewed annually. So that is the purpose of this report. Nothing substantial has changed. The program continues to be by the Lions Club to be quite successful fundraiser for them, and despite some challenges, has continued to be successful operating at that site.
Yeah, the amount of money that they raise is really quite impressive, And certainly we've talked prior to COVID, we had talked about them having a sign right at the entry to direct folks up to their bottle return section so they can continue the good work there. Any thoughts from council, comments, questions? Councillor Barry.
I support the addition of the sign.
Just drive traffic right to them directly. Okay. Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved, council receives report PW 1422 Dorset Lions Club Deposit Return Container Collection Program Update submitted by Melissa Murray dated April 7th, 2022. And council concurs with the recommendations made in the said report for continued collaboration with the Dorset Lions Club for promotion of and for the provision of space at the Dorset Transfer Station for the Dorset Lions Club Deposit Return Container Collection Service as per the terms of the 2019 agreement.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for those reports.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, next up is the Bear Lake Road Winter Maintenance Report. It is quite lengthy, and just sort of as a bit of a preamble that, as council knows, this was meant to be a special meeting in December, which unfortunately was canceled. So today it will be our first discussion. So we've seen the report before. There's a couple of pieces of late breaking news. As I say, council hasn't discussed this report yet, but on Monday, the CAO and I were advised by the president of the association verbally in a meeting that they, based on their legal opinions, that they fully intend to plow the road this coming winter or next winter, regardless of what council decides. And late yesterday afternoon, some legal correspondence was provided to the CAO or to municipal legal counsel. And that's a bit disappointing because that information is something that I had been encouraging the association to provide for some months now. And I think we know from the report that the municipality's legal counsel maintains the same opinion on the plowing of the road as it has for some 40 plus years. So in light of yesterday's Monday's information and yesterday's letter, council does have a closed session later today with legal counsel to discuss those matters. So, but in spite of that, I think it's important that this, stayed on the agenda and that council discuss it in whatever form council would like to, whether that's just a brief overview or a detailed dive on it. That's your choice. And I'd like to approach it in that way, looking for council. Do you want to start at the summary? The summary has a pretty concise overview of what's contained in the details. And it is a lengthy report with lots of legal advice contained in it. So it's your choice if council would like to go through it section by section. Adam is here for some technical support if needed. So looking for how council would like to approach this report now, knowing that we have some, some legal implications that need to be addressed on this complicated matter. So how would council like to approach this? Councillor Dayu.
Thanks. I'm certainly not going to have an opinion on this or a position on this until we've had a chance to review the new information with legal. So I suppose I would first move that we defer any decision until certainly after we've had that closed conversation. So in a future council meeting. I think it's worthwhile going through the summary with Mr. Thorne in order to get out there on public record and in a way that people can go back and listen to later what some of the key points are. I don't personally feel the need to go through the report point by point, and I do have precisely one technical question to ask of Mr. Thorne. So that's where I'm at the minute.
Okay, is council okay with that? And I think it's important too to acknowledge that attached to the report is a letter from the fire chief. One of the, this has been a contentious issue for a number of years. And I do want to acknowledge that the association that has formed, they've done a really good job. They've done a lot of research. They've provided a lot of really good information. The elephant in the room is we simply don't agree. The two parties don't agree. And one of the issues was around emergency services. And so the fire chief was asked, his report is attached, and he feels that notwithstanding plowing the road, that the fire services and to that road and to those property owners would remain as it is now because of the condition of that road, even in the winter with the percentage of grades and corners and whatnot. And we also have a letter from the Snowmobile Association because that road in the winter is used by the Snowmobile Club. They've said that snowmobiles and cars have coexisted, but they also acknowledge that there's some liability that continues to be attached. So notwithstanding any decision about plowing, as it says in the report, there still needs to be some, a review of the use of that road by snowmobiles anyway, in terms of, coexistence and liability and whatnot. There's no agreement, we don't have agreements with snowmobile associations, but I think the continued attention to this, as has been noted in the report, warrants a bit of a deeper dive on that. So notwithstanding what the plowing decision or outcome is, that as recommended, that there needs to be that look at snowmobiling. So having said that, I would go to Councillor Dayu for her technical question first, if you want to do that. Tell us what section it's in and we'll go there.
Absolutely fine. I wonder if we should do or listen to a summary by Adam first. Would that be all right? Or-
We can handle this whatever way people feel comfortable. If you want to go to the summary first, we can do that.
I would feel more comfortable with summary first, but
Okay.
happy to
Is
go.
everyone okay with that? Yep. Then we'll do that. So Adam, if you want to just take us through the summary, which is toward the end of the report. And that saves us having to read aloud all the
Yes, of course.
details which we've read. Yeah. So go ahead, please.
Through you, Mayor. I mean, as you've all read the summary, I have it here sitting in front of me. Aside from reading it word for word for you, if there is any questions as to each paragraph of the summary, would likely be the easiest for me to answer. At the end of the day, this has obviously been a long process for many, many years. I was here when we approached this back in 2016, when the report was done on the road as far as bringing it up to municipal standards, and the same issues that were brought forward back then are still in play now. Some of the major concerns are the slopes of the roadway, of the hills that are there. In every effort to try and reduce some of the grading maintenance, the township did put down some surface treatment to help, because we were just chasing that nonstop. So just a little bit of extra information there. But ideally, I think if there is any questions regarding the summary, it would be a little bit more efficient just to ask those, if that's okay.
Yes, I'm not sure if that's what you were looking for. I don't know. I think Adam's right, other than reading it aloud, which we've all read. Do you want to go to your question?
No, that's fine. I can certainly go to my question. In fact, I suppose I do have two, one short and one slightly longer. So my first question, I wonder, Adam, would you kindly explain what is the magic about the figure 12%? We see 12% grade written here at least once, possibly a couple of times. What is it about the 12% grade that triggers something to happen or to not happen? That would be my first question.
So through you, Mayor, the 12% grade will be the slope. So from the top of the hill to the bottom, if you can envision like a protractor, it'll give you that percentage of the hill's grade. And where that comes into play is that once you get past a certain amount of slope, a percentage of slope, which I don't have that in front of me, I'm sorry, then it becomes very dangerous for traffic when we're dealing with what it takes for a vehicle to stop on that road, what it takes for a vehicle to climb that road, especially when it's a loose surface top, being gravel, or even a surface treated top, such as what we have in place on some of those hills. One of the major concerns also with that 12% is the distance from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill. And if you can envision a 12% slope is rather steep. If you've traveled the road, most of those roads are that 12%. You don't have any ability to get slowed down at the bottom of the hill or get stopped. So some of the concerns with 12% being that if your vehicle was to take off on you, let's say, going down that hill, there's no area for you to stop because of that short curve at the bottom. Essentially a safe zone or a runoff that you would be able to get your vehicle slowed up, whether that's winter or summer, mostly speaking winter and ice conditions. So that's what that 12% is referring to, is the grade of slope, which potentially would cause problems down the road if we were to look at maintaining that in the winter.
That is your question?
That answers that question. Thanks.
And go ahead with your next one. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So as per the legal advice as summarized in this report, it is said that private plowing is legally tantamount to third-party contract plowing. And my question is regarding the implications for that on the association, should they be given permission to plow. From my conversation with Lyle several months ago, I understand that Bear Lake Road is a Class 6 road, but if plowing were to transpire, the plowing agent and therefore the municipality would be responsible for plowing as if it were a Class 5. So all of this, the MMS that don't really exist for a Class 6 would be pulled into force as if it were a Class 5 road, which would mean more inspections, more patrols. You've got to keep an eye on the weather more than you would for Class 6, et cetera, et cetera. So my question for you is that your understanding as well, that should the association be given the authority to plow, that they would have to meet minimum maintenance standards for a Class 5 road, including all of those other stipulations, instead of relying on the company doing the plowing to decide based on wisdom received and best practice when they believe it's appropriate to plow or necessary to plow. Is that your understanding as well?
Through you, Mayor, this is a great question. You know what? I'm really glad that you brought this up, because minimum maintenance standards, as you know, is what generally is what municipalities follow. So yes, this road does classify as a 5-6, and although there is no classification for a 6, we would be looking at a Class 5. However, if council was to go ahead with allowing this road to be plowed by third party, I would strongly recommend that we would look at the level of service required. Just because the minimum maintenance standards are set out as so, doesn't mean that we have to follow them to the minimum. You know, a lot of our roads in Algonquin Highlands are 5-6s, and we maintain our roads at much higher level because that's the level of service that our ratepayers have come to expect and that we have, agreed to, if you will. So it would be really, really important that if this was to move forward in allowing them to plow, that the township would really, really need to look at the level of service based on other roads in the area, based on that road specifically. Because I would not recommend plowing or maintaining this road at a Class 5, just due to the hills, the corners, the conditions of the road. It would need to be maintained much higher to reduce liability.
Do you have a follow-up?
I do. That's a very helpful context and food for further thought. But I also wonder if you could maybe be as precise as you're able to on whether that would then default to the to basically our third party contractor to do. Do you know how the mechanics of that would work, so that if we were to give them permission to plow, they would have to sign up to effectively do all of these things based on whatever maintenance standard council chooses based on staff recommendation, or would that fall to us? Would we be legally beholden to make sure that at least a minimum of a Class 5 standard was met?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not sure if I can answer that question. That's more in my thought process, more of a legal question to be answered, because I would think that if council was to approve winter maintenance through a third party, it would be up to council to agree on the contract that would be put forward. And in that said contract, we would need legal advice to ensure that we were held, or that the liability was not held to us by means of picking and choosing what standard we would want to have on this road based on other roads within the municipality.
Yeah, and I believe that that's been part of the, what is essentially a circular argument, is that the provision of plowing by a party contracted by the association would still be held, which I think we were going to say, would still be held to the standard that the township sets, because the township is ultimately responsible. And that that's where you get into the circular part, is in order for the township to mitigate its liability, the accountability of ensuring that that standard is met by a third-party plow operator involves staff inspecting the road that they've already said they don't feel comfortable going on. And then, as has been outlined in the report, the sort of domino effect of that is that with joint and several liability, which a lot of people don't understand, that is a huge issue that certainly AMO has been fighting, and the Warden's Caucus, there's been battles about this with the province for years, wherein a municipality is always deemed to have deep pockets. And even if a municipality is deemed 1% responsible for any kind of incident, it can be ordered through the courts to pay 100% of the costs attached. And there are communities that have historically, a couple of years ago, there was a couple of communities that took down their play sets in parks because they couldn't afford the liability attached to that. Sadly, that is the reality. What makes it even worse is that if there's a health and safety violation in terms of a safe environment, wherein council directs staff to have to inspect a road that has to be inspected in order to mitigate the risks of a third-party plower not meeting the minimum maintenance standards that council sets on the road, council and senior staff can be held responsible, legally responsible, for any accident. Is there going to be an accident or a problem? We don't know, probably not, but there could be. And that's the huge issue, is that there are two things that reach through insurance and attach themselves directly to people, and that's safe drinking water and health and safety issues. And joint and several or an issue like this would fall into that, as we've been advised by legal counsel, and I think we already know. And so that's the biggest consideration is, whether members of council are prepared. As Councillor Dayu has said, we're not really prepared to make any decisions today, but the other elephant in the room is that individual members of council can be held legally responsible through joint and several and the reaching through of health and safety issues. That's a big deal, and that's a big deal. So to be considered. So were you going to add any more to that, or was that just about
No,
capture that?
You captured it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky connection of this issue is I don't think there's anybody among us who wouldn't love to say, let's let these folks plow the road, get in there in the winter. Like in theory, let's do that. But when you have to work with contracts and third parties, the association is incorporated, which is a good thing. And as has been noted in the report too, but a plow operator, a business person, and a corporation, they're limited liability. We are not. The municipality and senior staff and council members are not. So, there's issues of, who has the authority. The main issue is who has jurisdiction over the road and who has the authority to take care of it. And that's where the two parties don't agree. And so legal counsel is talking about that, and we'll get some more information later today. So I don't know what council would like to do next. I'd suggest that we, having stated some of those things and asked a couple of questions, defer pending further questions. There we go. Questions, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I don't have any questions right now, and I completely agree with the thought that we need to defer any decision that we make. I've got still some other outstanding concerns that aren't necessarily addressed in this report, and we have new legal responses that we haven't really had a chance to discuss or look at the impacts of, and I'm not prepared to make any decision right now. I think we need to defer.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Barry.
I was just trying to remember, do we have any idea of what percentage of population is captured in the road association? Like, it was my understanding that not everyone that is on the road is in favor of access. So I just wanted to know, when we say the road association, I just wanted a bit of an idea if we have a number of percentage. Do we know, is it 60%, 80%? Do we know how many people
or not?
It may be written down in a note somewhere.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know that I have had a number of conversations with the president, and they've been, each of them have been quite extensive, and we've had extensive email communication. I know Councillor Dayu, as the ward rep, has had communications, and I'm sure that in some of those conversations somewhere, I think it's like upwards of 60 properties. Is that, do you know? Does somebody know that detail?
I believe there's 130 properties on Bear Lake Road.
Mhm.
I think the association represents approximately 50, from what I understand.
Okay, well, we don't really know for sure, but it's not 2%. Like it's a higher, it's the majority, which is higher than it was in the past. So the property owners themselves over the years, I was trying to get into my email and couldn't, but I'm sure my email file from this goes back to 2014. And I know that this issue for the municipality goes back to prior to amalgamation into the 70s and the 60s and 70s. So it's been an issue for a long, long time. I'm going to go to Councillor Dayu and then back to Deputy Mayor Danielson.
The most recent number I've heard as well as hovers around the 50-60 mark. The context is really important though. There are a lot of people on that road who have 3-season cottages who have absolutely no intention of coming up in the wintertime. So they wouldn't necessarily join the association, nor would they even necessarily offer their public support for the association. So why people have not signed up for the association cannot be assumed. And I don't think anyone here is, but just to make clear that it's the numbers not reflective necessarily of the opinions on the road.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember too is we did see at the delegation, that was a lengthy delegation last October, that the association had expressed, and maybe it's changed now, but had expressed the intent that that if you didn't belong to the association, the winter association, that you wouldn't be able to use the road. And so it's a jurisdictional issue. You can't stop property owners from going to their place. So the jurisdiction and who has the authority to do what on this road, because it is on Crown land. We have bylaws that indicate that the road has been accepted into township control from 1971. So it's complicated, and again, it's a difference of legal opinion on who has that authority and jurisdictions is where we're at right now. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Oh, that was one of the concerns that I had. It was my understanding that the number of people within the association were at somewhere between 50 and 60%, it seemed to me. This idea that they were going to say to others who were not part of the association that they couldn't use the road, I seriously have a problem with. A question that I've got is when we do, like say a name changing or a speed limit change, isn't there a percentage of support that we require from residents?
There is for the road assumption bylaw.
80% or something like that. I'm just kind of wondering what that number is and if that would, relate to this at all.
I don't know. I do know that in the road assumption bylaw, that if people on a private road want a municipality to assume their road and take it into the road flock, that there's quite a complicated process. The road needs to be brought up to standards, and there has to be a certain percentage of users of that road, property owners who use the road, who support that. So similarly, and there are percentages attached to other things, but off the top of my head, are collectively, we're obviously not figuring that out. But I don't know that would matter. This isn't a matter of a number of people want it, therefore they can have it, and that applies to everything. So our job is to make decisions that are in the best interest of the municipality, as well as the public, but depending on a lot of complicating and variable factors, which is what we're seeing in this situation. Deputy Mayor Liz.
Well, and for me, that's the bottom line. What's in the best interest of the municipality as a whole, which is all of taxpayers. And that's where I come to a screeching halt with agreeing to this, because I just don't see yet that it is in the best interest of the municipality. It's in the best interest of the people who want to open the road for sure. And there is a part of me that was like to be able to say, no problem, go ahead. But there are so many problems and so many things to overcome that I just don't think we're ready to make a decision, like I said earlier.
No, and thank you for raising that, because let's not forget we had the additional complication of the logging this year. And so again, loggers have crown rights, and we were notified I don't know, last fall, that there was a company that had the logging rights and to use Bear Lake Road. And because it's access to Crown tracts of land, the logging company was advised that there was this complicated issue that was occurring, and they technically asserted their Crown rights to use the road. And so this winter, there was personal use, logging use, and snowmobile use. That's why I think ultimately there needs to be definitely that review of the snowmobile club, and I think they'd be willing to work with that if that means whatever that means. We don't know what that means yet, but that this winter also did prove that personal traffic, logging traffic, and snowmobile traffic can coexist. So we need to acknowledge that did happen this year. But the assertion of the Crown rights by the logging company to use that road and create their landings and whatnot, the township had no authority over that. So even though they were advised, we don't like it very much, they said we have the Crown right to do so, and did. So there are certain things out of our control, but which for we would ultimately be held responsible because we have jurisdiction over the road. So I think we can probably leave it at that. I think, it's clear that there's much more to happen with this issue, and lots of conversation yet to have. So I don't know, do we receive or do you have defer on there?
Receive and defer
Okay,
for legal advice.
all right, and that's been moved and seconded. Does the council want to say anything else about this issue? I mean, we've been at this a long time. Well, the municipality's been at it for a long, long time. Nothing too much has changed, but maybe the conversation is different this time. Okay, go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dennison, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, council receives report PW 5321 regarding Bear Lake Road winter maintenance submitted by Adam Thorne dated April 7th, 2022, and the council defers its decision pending further legal review and advice.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, everyone.
Next up is fire services business. We'll bring in the fire chief. Good morning, chief.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
You have a report for us, an update on the firefighter certification.
Yes, I do. Through you, Mayor, I just want to briefly highlight the report. In January 28th of this year, the Minister's Solicitor General brought through a documentation for firefighter certification. The process has gone through multiple agencies, OAFC, OFM, along with AMO, and the proposed date was to put in effect as of July 1st. There was a lot of consultation at our last meeting that we had, the Zoom meeting I had with the OFM as of Friday. It looks like this has passed. So where it says they hope to have it in effect for July 1st, it looks like it's in that process and it will be in effect as of July 1st. Couple of things I'd like to highlight is our township is more than prepared to meet all the certifications in this program through the previous years and the way we've been set up for training with our recruit training for 1001 firefighter 1 and 2. And we also do hazmat and we do the extrication training, all meeting all the requirements of the certification. There's no reason why we wouldn't be a full service fire department. So that's really good. I think we can go into this positively as a township. There is a couple of changes we have to do going forward. The training officers already changed documentation a little bit. Prior to this, we would, for example, everyone came through training on say a Monday night, the whole group would get credited for doing pump ops if we worked with portable pumps. Now it's got to be firefighter specific. So the person actually does the pump will be signed off by the officer doing the program. And that's just to make sure that we have accountability when and if we get audited by the OFM later. The program that's going in is a 4 to 8 year implementation part of it, but they will be in auditing what we have existing. So we're really good that way. The one thing we do really have to ensure is attendance. So prior to July 1st, I will bring through the CAO, we bring a policy forward for attendance policy. The overall certification has different designations. A full certified firefighter would be a firefighter could enter the building, perform all the interior firefighter functions for fire suppression. And then they have a supplementary firefighter certification. And our department has some senior firefighters that are great assets to our department, but they just aren't interior firefighters. So they'll certify to the lower grade firefighter, which is external only. And they provide a wonderful resource. They would look after using hoses outside of the building, running portable pumps, accountability. They definitely have a role and they are an asset to our department. As we go down through the program, there is a part about financial impact. At this time, I don't know what the financial impact will be. What we have to do is with our officers, we have to bring them up to the NFPA 1021 Officer 1 and the NFPA 1041, which is a fire instructor, to meet the minimum required. Most of our firefighters have that, but if we're unable to teach them internally, they'll take an online course, so there will be a little cost there. And I feel that would still be within our training budget going forward this year. So from our perspective, I think we're in really great shape. And most of the issues they brought forward for the training records and the attendance part of it, that's something that we should have or could also fall under the Health and Safety Act, doing our due diligence, provide appropriate training. So I do feel confident it's positive for us, and it should be well for us going forward.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you. And I know that the history of careered firefighters on in our services also assist, because they probably come ready to meet the criteria for certain levels, which puts us, any departments that have careered firefighters, the two hatters as they're called, can be a little bit ahead of the game. And I think to your very last point, the attendance policy will be very important in terms of mitigating any health and safety problems. You have a call like yesterday's, there was a house fire and all three departments responded, and that's a lot of work by a lot of people, and we need to make sure that that everybody has got the check mark in the right place so we can serve the community as well as possible. So while there's a little bit of there's unknown costs to this going forward, but it's nice to know, Chief, that we're well on our way with our existing training protocol. So thank you for that.
Right. The one unique thing we have, it's always been a bit of a liability because we've had three departments within our township, where other townships have one. Having three separate stations gives us 3 training nights. So if a firefighter is on station 80 and can't attend Monday's training, the exact same training is going on at station 60 on Tuesday. And our firefighters are working so well together, there'd be no issues with that firefighter going up to station 60 to take that training to keep their attendance records in line.
Yeah,
So,
that's terrific. That's terrific. Thank you for that. Are there any questions from council for the chief on the certification protocol? It's a good thing in the technical briefing that one in the one slide, it says explaining the compliance and has a little red arrows explaining it. It's a good thing that was there, because it's a bit complicated. But thank you for this, and we'll see how we go going forward, and we'll have a resolution.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, council receives report FD 822 regarding firefighter certification in the province of Ontario, submitted by Michael French and dated April 7th, 2022.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
thank you. Enjoy your day, everybody.
Thank you. Would council like to take a break? Okay, we'll take a break and we'll see you back here in 20 minutes or so. Yep. Okay, we will go to break then.
I can't hear you, folks.
That's because I didn't have my mic on.
Okay.
2 strikes for me. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
First up for you is, I don't think we need to discuss it, just a couple of little tax write-offs. They are what they are. We have a mover and a seconder, so we will go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Jansen, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that council receives report TT 1220.
Are we okay now? Jeannie, can you hear me? It's a seance now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So we have a resolution for the tax write-offs.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Jansen, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that council receives report TT 1222 regarding tax write-offs submitted by Karen Mins dated April 7th, 2022. And the council hereby approves the noted tax write-offs under section 357 of the Municipal Act for taxes in the amount of $658.22 for 2021-2022.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Next up is always the fund report, the ARL, the annual repayment limit. So Jeannie, tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. Yes, this is the annual repayment limit that is provided by the ministry to the municipalities annually based on the FIR response or numbers from the previous year. So it's just updated each year. The ARL limit is set at 25% of the annual own source revenues, including property taxes, user fees, and investment income. And this must be considered when the township determines they need to do some planned borrowing, and we have to make sure we meet the capacity limits. So it's just for information only at this point.
Thank you. And we had it recently at the county, and it's just always astonishing that the repayment limit is not the amount that you're deemed capable of borrowing, but that's the amount you're capable of deemed to be capable of paying back. So, but we have no debt. So thank you for that. And go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved, council receives treasury report TT 1322 submitted by Jean Hughes and dated April 7th, 2022 as information regarding the 2022 annual repayment limit.
All in favor? That is carried. And finally, just the amended agreement for the extension to the library project. Is there anything you want to tell us about that or that we need to know?
Other than I reached out to the ministry, and they were willing to extend it now to the end of this year to ensure that we hopefully get this project up and completed by the end of this year.
I think we and a number of members of the public are anxious to see that come through as well. Any questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Jansen. Be it resolved, council receives the Enabling Accessibility Fund Grant amended agreement for the Stanhope Library Project, and the council ratifies the execution of the amending agreement signed by the mayor and clerk on March 28th, 2022 between the corporation of the Township of Algonquin Highlands and Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Canada, as represented by the Minister of Employment and Social Development.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, before we call that, you have a question?
Yeah, it's not in relation to the resolution. I just wondered, are we good to go now with, or do we still have supply issues with material? And now it's just a matter of scheduling the work, or do we still have supply issues?
I'll let the CAO answer that.
We have most of everything. We do have an issue with one piece of the equipment that we received. So we're working through that at the moment.
Yeah, it is disappointing. As you know, mentioned, there's been some, concern from the public. There was a misunderstanding that the township had all the equipment in place, or had all the equipment and just wasn't getting around to doing the work. And that is absolutely not the case at all. Supply chain challenges, and now this one problem with a certain piece of something. But the good news is library services remain and have remained available in both Minden and Dysart. So assuming that folks would travel there for some purpose, library services are still available.
And I just want to add as well that we've made arrangements with the library board to pick up books as well. We did that in December, and we're doing that again this month. So books will be available from the library.
Yeah, and that was, I think that was in one of the reports of the library board. So people are happy about that because there was, yeah, it's been a couple of months where people had sort of books they were waiting to get their hands on. So, okay, we have the resolution. So I will ask for all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. No administration business, planning business is next. So we'll bring in Mr. O'Callaghan. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning.
A number of items for you today. First one is an extension request for the subdivision on Quagama.
Yes, this subdivision was originally approved back in 2019 for 4 lots on Quagama Lake. It is set to lapse on May 15th of this year. And the applicants have requested a 1-year extension just to allow them some additional time to fulfill those conditions without the project lapsing. So staff would recommend approval of that extension.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives report PL 4022 prepared by Sean O'Callaghan and dated April 7th, 2022 regarding draft plan of subdivision 46T 9001 on lands located on part of lot 27, concession 1, geographic township of McClintock, submitted by Building Arts Development, Inc. And further, the council recommends approval of the 1-year time extension for draft approved plan subdivision file number 46T 19001.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. A proposed severance on Deer Lake.
Yes, this is for a proposed lot addition for some properties on Deer Lake. So we would not be creating any new building lots. It would just be an addition to an existing developed lot on Deer Lake. One point or a couple points to note is a majority of the subject lands are an unevaluated wetland. So our official plan does note where development is proposed on an unidentified or unevaluated wetland. We will require a site assessment to accurately identify those wetland boundaries. So that is a recommended condition I've included in my report. Another point to note is that there is an unopened road allowance that runs between the proposed severed lands and the benefiting parcels. So another condition I'm recommending is the closure of that road allowance to allow the lots to actually merge, because they would not be able to physically merge if they're not directly adjacent to each other. So that is another condition I'll be recommending. Other than that, it's the standard conditions as outlined in my report, and would recommend approval with those conditions in place.
Any questions, thoughts from council? Okay, go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that council receives planning report PL 4122 prepared by Sean O'Callaghan and dated April 7th, 2022 regarding proposed severance of lands located at part of lots 11 and 12, concession 9, geographic township of Sherburne, Deer Lake, submitted by Marie Poirier Planning and Associates on behalf of Tool and Lee. And further, the council supports in principle the proposed severance subject to the following conditions: 1, payment of taxes, including penalty and interest; 2, settlement of 5% parkland dedication or cash in lieu in the amount of $250 for the severed parcel shall be paid to the Township of Algonquin Highlands pursuant to Section 51(1) of the Planning Act. 3, a copy of the draft reference plan be submitted to the planner of the Township of Algonquin Highlands for review and comment prior to the registration of the plan. 4, the unopened road allowance running between the proposed severed and benefiting lands being closed. 5, the severed parcel merge in title with the benefiting lands. 6, the registered owners are to submit an environmental impact study, EIS, completed by a qualified professional demonstrating that there will be no negative impacts to the wetland feature or its ecological function as a result of this proposal. And 7, the registered owners are to enter into a severance agreement pursuant to Section 5126 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 to address any recommendations of the EIS and site development plan.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is the Rogers Telecommunications Tower and the public process that has been undertaken.
Yes, so we have, or I've been in contact with Rogers. They are proposing to construct a 90-meter tower at 1089 McBrien Road. They did hold a virtual public meeting for the tower on February 23rd of this year. It was a virtual meeting. They have prepared a summary of the comments received at that meeting. We've received 4 letters of support. Rogers has followed the telecommunication policy that the township does have in place, and staff would recommend supporting the project.
Any questions from council on this? I'm glad to see that in the comments that the MBC has weighed in. So that's important because I know that as we've talked about in our tower sort of process, we don't approve towers, we just approve that the proper process that we put in place has been followed. But if you're in the lee of the tower, there's no visual problem. But if you're on the far side of Maple Lake, you're going to be looking across a lake at a tower. So, but I know that it's much needed. I did have a conversation recently with somebody who was, like many others, sort of begging and pleading for some solutions, and I advised them that this was underway, and they were thrilled. So we need service here. So it's important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've had just recently a number of conversations with people in that area that have had some serious issues, and hopefully this is going to resolve it for them.
Mhm. Absolutely. If there are no questions or comments, go ahead, please, Madam Clerk.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, Council receives report PL 4222 regarding proposed Rogers Telecommunications Tower Site C8525 submitted by Sean O'Callaghan dated April 7th, 2022, and that Council has satisfied the procedures in the Township's telecommunication facility installations policies have been followed in order to comply with the requirements for the consultation with the Public and Land Use Authority for the tower proposal. And further, Council supports the installation of a 90-meter telecommunications tower known as Rogers Site C8525 1089 McBrien Road, part of lots 27 and 28, concession 4, geographic township of Stanhope.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And next up is the very road closing that we were just speaking about a moment ago.
Yes, exactly. So this is the road allowance that runs between the proposed severed lands and the benefiting parcel. I would note that it is a road allowance that leads to water, and generally we would not support such a proposal, but in this case, it's a road allowance that leads from water to water. So our policy does allow consideration of those applications. So given that, staff would recommend approval of the approval in principle of the application.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council? No, go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Council receives report PL 4322 regarding the proposed road allowance closing between lots 10 and 11, concession 9, geographic township of Sherburne, submitted by Sean O'Callaghan dated April 7th, 2022, and that Council approves in principle applications RA 121. Need to stop up and close and convey the said road allowance, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Shore Road closing on Kawagama.
This is an application to close the shore road allowance in front of this property on Kawagama Lake. It is a developed piece of property. The owners are looking to do some work to an existing dock and boatport, but would first need to close the shore road allowance. So staff would recommend approval in principle of the application.
Nice and straightforward. Any questions, comments from council? No, go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, Council receives report PL 4422 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 21, concession 11, geographic township of Sherburne, part of Kawagama Lake, and that Council approves in principle application OSRA 422 made to stop up, close, and convey the said shoreline road allowance, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? It's carried. Next up for you is a joint application on Boschcon.
Yes, this is another application to close the shore road allowance in front of these two properties on Boshkung Lake. Again, they are developed parcels of land, but nothing really out of ordinary with the application. So staff would recommend it proceed through the regular process to close that.
Anything from council? You're making a face.
Just rather an extraordinary dock structure across a huge percentage of the one property, but that's not in relation to acquiring the shore road allowance, so just a comment.
Okay, you may not be wrong. Is there anything else? Any other questions, comments from council? Go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Jansen, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that council receives report PL 4522 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of Lot 10, Concession 4, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Boshkung Lake. And the council approves in principle application OSRA 5AB 22 made to stop up, close, and convey the said shoreline road allowance, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. This one is coming back, Warburton and Holly, and there's an additional piece of information. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so this is an application that I'm sure council is very familiar with. So my report here is presenting the bylaw to close the shore road allowance. As council would recall, it was initially sent back to the applicant to revise their survey to remove a disputed portion of the shore road allowance, the dispute coming from an adjacent property owner. So they have revised the plan to exclude that portion. Several attempts were made to contact the objecting parties, both their solicitor and the property owner directly. No response was received to any of those inquiries. And just yesterday, I received an email from their solicitor objecting to the revised plan, specifically with the projection of the lot line. So they're not disputing the 10-foot portion that's been eliminated, but they are now disputing the projection of that lot line. Staff do continue or would actually recommend the bylaw be passed as presented today, just based on the fact that several attempts were made to circulate this revised plan for comment, and no comment were received until just yesterday. I'm quite confident that even with the projected lot line, it would be a minimal amount that the plan would change. This is an application that started back in 2019. The property owner is looking to do some work to their cottage that is on the shore road allowance, and they have gone through the process of trying to appease the objections. And by eliminating that 10-foot portion, I think they've adequately done so. So staff would recommend approval of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. It is disappointing when there are these last-minute submissions. You know, that we have quite a prescribed process for soliciting and receiving comments. And we know from this conversation in the past that there's previous reports from you have noted attempts to reach out to the parties. So looking for thoughts from council on what Sean has presented. He's recommending that it go ahead anyway, and looking for thoughts from council on that. I'm just seeing nodding heads. Okay, so then we will proceed. Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Shortreeve, second by Deputy Mayor Jansen. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 4622 regarding the proposed shore road allowance fronting property located at part of Lot 15, Concession 8, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Warburton, Holly, Halls Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callahan, dated April 7th, 2022, and that council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendation made in the said report, and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Proposed closing of, this is the bylaw on Kabakwa or Peach Lake.
Yes, this is another bylaw to close the shore road allowance in front of this property. It was circulated for comments to neighboring properties as well as to the prescribed agencies. No objections or easements were requested, so staff would recommend approval of the bylaw as presented.
Thoughts from council? Go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dennison, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 4822 regarding the proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 6, concession 10, geographic township of Stanhope, Kapakwa Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callahan, dated April 7th, 2022. And the council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendations made in the said report and directs a bylaw to stop up closing the bay. The said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Another bylaw for on Beach Lake.
Yes, another bylaw here. It was circulated to adjacent property owners as well as the prescribed agencies. Again, no objections were received or easements requested, so staff would also recommend approval of the bylaw closing the short road allowance.
Anything from council? Go ahead, please.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Dennison. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 4922 regarding the proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 21, concession 4, geographic township of Stanhope, Beach Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callahan, dated April 7th, 2022. And the council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, convey the said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? Carried. Lower Welch Lake is next.
Yes, this is another bylaw to close the short road allowance in front of this property. And once again, no objections were received or easements requested. So staff would recommend approval of the bylaw as presented.
Anything from council? Go ahead, please.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 5022 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 5, concession 8, geographic township of Stanhope, Lower Welch Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callahan, dated April 7th, 2022. And council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? Carried. And same again on Kawagama.
Yes, another bylaw to close the short road allowance in front of this property. No easements requested or objections received, and staff approval of the bylaw closing the short road allowance.
Anything from council? Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved, the council receives report PL 5122 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 20, concession 12, geographic township of Sherburne, Kawagama Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callahan, dated April 7th, 2022. And council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
Anything? All in favor? Sorry, that's carried. I didn't say it was carried. Same again and a Kawagama again.
Yes, another bylaw to close the short road allowance in front of this property. Once again, no objections received or easements requested, and staff would recommend approval of the bylaw.
Anything from council? Go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dennison, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 5222 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 26, concession 2, geographic township of McClintock, Kawagama Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callahan, dated April 7th, 2022. And the council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendations made in the said report and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? Carried. Up next, an interesting one, the request to close only a portion of the shore road allowance.
Yeah, so this application was originally considered by council in June of 2021, where approval in principle was granted. It's for an island property on Oxtongue Lake. A new survey has been completed now and shows a fairly substantial shore road allowance running along the entire shoreline of the island, which at the current rate of 70 cents a square foot equals approximately $96,000 to close that short road allowance. So we have received a request to close only a portion of the short road allowance where the buildings currently occupy. The township policy has been to close an entire short road allowance in front of properties. So to close only a portion would be breaking from that policy. and generally from a planning perspective, it's favorable to close an entire shore road allowance to not create irregular lot shapes. So staff are recommending that the entire shore road allowance continue to be closed and not just a portion, but I'm happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Yeah, thank you. You know, $96,000 is a tremendous sum of money, and my concern is that if we don't consider just closing a portion because of where the buildings are, these folks they can never do any work on their properties, and I think that's unfair. We have set aside this policy in the past for unusually shaped properties such as this. I think we've done it, I know, at least once. We've done it more than that? Do you remember?
Not for a lot of years, once in the last few years, I would say.
So we have the authority to set aside the policy, make an exception given the circumstances of this particular property. So look to council if they're interested in considering that. Councillor Dayu?
Yes, under the circumstances, I would wholeheartedly wish to seek a way of not billing them 96,000. And if we are able to set aside the policy, then I would support that, yes.
Deputy Mayor Liz?
Sadly, I do not support it. I think that we have turned down a number of requests that are similar to this. I recognize it's an awful lot of money, but so is the price of land right now. And you know, this is as prime land as it gets. You know, I do feel for them given the cost, but I just don't, I don't see the rationale given that we've already turned down other people. Otherwise, I think before I'd be willing to do it, I'd want to look at it, some kind of, revision of policy. Or I've had a lot of people talk to me about the cost of acquiring shore road allowances, and it's a concern to people that it is as much as it is, but I can't support it at this time.
Okay, looking for thoughts from the other two members of council. I've got a little stick count here. I've got one yes and one no.
I sort of tend to lean on Councillor Dayu's side, and given the price of the entire road shore allowance, basically they want to be able to continue to use the area they have. And in order to build docks and that, they would have to acquire the whole island. So I support amending this.
Before I go to Councillor Shortreed, I guess in the spirit of fostering discussion, what would be for Councillors Dayu and Barry, what would have to be the trigger to think differently? Is it just a matter of this appears, unfair, or the 96,000 is onerous, or to Liz's point, it's a vacation property and it's simply a cost of business that goes with a vacation property? So what would be the thing that would make you decide it differently? Because what happens is then it becomes up to council instead of relying on policy. It becomes up to council. Does it mean, to Liz's point, does it mean that there could be an influx of applications saying, well, what about me? What about me? What about me? That's the concern. However, $96,000, an awful lot of money. The part to me that's unfair is that happens to be where their buildings are. That's my concern. So is a property owner going to be forever sort of damned to not be able to do what they want because they don't have $100,000? I'm just trying to foster discussion. Liz?
Affordability has been brought to us before as an issue.
Yes.
And a reason, and we have turned them down. And affordability is a relative matter. To this amount of money would mean I would never be able to do it, but it wouldn't. There'd be other people that would do it. They might not like it, but they wouldn't have a problem coming up with the money. And how do we discern between those people? That we need to either look at the policy and try and figure out some criteria that we can say, here's our specific criteria, and this fits and this doesn't. We've turned down requests for this very reason. The fact that it's $98,000 to me, you know, I mean, $98,000 could be, you know, the same challenge to somebody else with a $15,000 acquisition.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, it's relative. It's
Mhm.
a personal sliding scale. I'm just gonna, before I get to you, I'm gonna actually ask Councillor Shortry what it is, what her position is on the matter.
I don't think that we should be taking the dollar amount into consideration at all. It's, if you're purchasing shore road allowance, whether it's 900 or 90,000, it should be irrelevant. So if there was no price tag, if it was $5,000, would you say, okay?
And that's kind of where I was going, again, deliberately, and to the point of the deputy mayor is, because we have said, no, we have followed our policy, and on at least one occasion that we can recall in the last X number of years, we have made an exception. I don't recall the details. So is it time to do a policy review and then make decisions going forward contained within that review? I think that's where I'm going with this conversation. Councillor Dayu.
I would support the idea of a policy review, although it could be that we're approaching quickly the end of the shoreline allowances out there to be sold, but nevertheless, that shouldn't deter us from reviewing our policy. I think to your question about, you know, what makes this different, or on what basis would you say yes to one and no to the other, I'd have to think about that, and would certainly do so in advance of any policy review. But at first glance, my answer would be, the proportion of shore road allowance to square footage of the actual property itself is way off what you would normally see. It's actually a very small property, and most of that property is shore road allowance. So if there's going to be some sort of technical trigger anywhere, I would encourage us to consider that as a part of that technical trigger. You almost can't move without stepping on a shore road allowance on this particular property. And I think that's the big difference. It's the cost for the overall size of the property is not aligned. Now, a question that I put to Mr. Callahan earlier, and maybe he can answer now, but for to think about this and other cases, is what if we offered them a license of occupation instead? And I'll let Sean respond to that. But I wonder if there are other ways of making their shore road allowance available to them without having to break our own policies on the sale. But I don't know, should we put that to
Yeah, I mean,
Sean?
we can ask Sean to respond to us all in regard to that question. The concern then is equitability across the board. So does that mean, you're right, shore road allowances are a finite commodity, and we're seeing more and more purchases going forward. So you're right, they will end eventually, but they could end pretty quickly if we set a precedent for a license of occupation, would be my concern, because that would end shore road purchases, because they do cost money, which is relative to size and shape, but a license, on the other hand, is a little bit different. So I'll come back to you, Liz, but I'm going to ask Sean what his thoughts are on that question.
I would be reluctant to support a license of occupation just simply based on our current policy of closing a shore road allowance in front of a property. And as has been discussed already, I mean, that could set precedent for other people to come forward and request that option. And I know I've mentioned before that, there's no precedent setting in planning. In this particular case, this is an application under the Municipal Act. So I'm not sure that would apply in this case. So I wouldn't be comfortable supporting a license of occupation or presenting that as an option where there is a shore road allowance, that we do have a policy that would allow people to purchase that land.
And thoughts from council on what Sean has just advised? I mean, it makes perfect sense that's the way we go. Or you look like you're going to press your button there any second.
Actually, I have to remember to turn it off as well. Therein is the reason to look at a policy. Like, I mean, it's not a bad idea, but we need to look at the ramifications. And I'm still kind of stuck on, all the people that have paid the money for their shore road allowances, and like, they're going to come back and say, like, what? Why? I mean, why didn't you give us that opportunity? Or we couldn't afford it either. I have an odd piece of land. I can see making exceptions for odd pieces of land, but we don't have a policy that allows for that. I mean, maybe we can just defer this, for now as opposed to denying it.
I guess that would depend on whether or not these folks are are interested in acquiring the shoreline because the cottage is caving in and they need to do work this summer, or if it's just something they're doing as a course of property ownership. Certainly having heard the conversation, I can see both sides, and I'm keeping my little stick count because if you guys are tied, it comes to me. So on the one hand, I can see, which was my first take, and I said, it's unfair that there's this huge property and it's $96,000, tremendous amount of money. But I think you make a very good point is that's the property these folks happen to have, and we have a policy in place. So, and I would say in consideration of the fact that it could open up, to your point again, folks who couldn't afford it or will be, we don't have the criteria or the parameters within which to make the exception is the policy related concern. And that's, to me, no precedent planning, but there sure is in the public view. So we need to be careful around that. You had your hand up, Councillor Dayu.
I do appreciate all of these things, but policies are there in order to try to support us progressing according to what is reasonable and what is good for lots of people. And I think there are those few exceptions where the policy simply cannot reflect the reality on the ground. And this is one of those occasions where the cost is just is certainly not in keeping with the actual scope of the property. And so I still support that for this application, we sell them just a portion, and then we look, whenever staff is able to bring it into the workload, we look at a policy review which would be there for future applicants, or give the applicants for this application the opportunity to remove their application unless and until we do come up with that policy review, which might benefit them more than this.
Yeah, it might. Sean, do you know the context of the application? Are they looking to do work soon, or is it just they just want to do something in the future and they're planning ahead?
I'm not exactly sure what their initial plans or immediate plans are with the property. So yeah, sorry, I don't have that information.
Thoughts from either councillors on this side of the table? Anything further to add? Yeah, I think that we should sell them this portion and do the policy review. So I'm landing right in the middle because there is now. I'm sorry, I'm going to back that up a little bit. Sean, you said that the application, and I have read the report, but the application is being made. This application is being made under the Municipal Act. Is that what you said, or did I just mishear that?
Road closings are.
Okay, so why is that? Why would that be different?
I was just noting between precedent setting. So in planning, there's no precedent in setting when considering applications for zoning bylaw amendment or minor variance. Each application
okay,
evaluated on their own merit.
right. Okay, well, I agree with everything that everybody has said, but if I'm the casting decision maker, I think we should absolutely do a policy review to see what we can do and just sell the portion at this time. That's where. Yes, ma'am.
No, I guess I was gonna.
You have to put your button on.
At first I thought, are we at a tie vote? We are. I just had to kind of go around and think about that. Sorry.
Yes, we are. Okay, so and then so Sean, we'll see a policy of some sort come forward to see if we can help out going forward. Sean?
Yeah, and just for clarification, would that policy review allow options for purchasing just portions of short road allowances or license of occupation? Or I guess I could present those options to council at that time.
A license of occupation is absolutely off the table for me because, it's here's the challenging part is it's great to do a nice thing in certain circumstances. The challenge is going to be, why doesn't it apply to everybody? I only have 100 feet, but 70 of it is bush, and I just want to buy this piece because I want to do a thing. And what we're saying is, anecdotally, that's different than $96,000 on what essentially is a piece of land surrounded by the shore road allowance. But we need to be prepared that others could come forward and say, what is your decision? What's your trigger point? What's your threshold? Where, why, and how do you make that decision? And the other thing to be careful of is that we all need to be careful of is we have over the years made a number of decisions where we have taken the decision-making power out of this room and put it into policy. And one of them, it's a very different idea, but one of them is waiving rental fees for community centers. So we had the conversation, we had created a policy wherein staff can make that decision based on the criteria we set. So by, but I've already said, you know, that I support this, given this particular circumstance. We need to not change our own rules or the rules that exist in the world and bring more decisions back in here that should be made reliant purely on policy as opposed to people. So that's documentation takes the decisions from people and puts it into policy. Councillor Dayu and then Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Just my final thought on the policy review, which I know Sean will think about and get back to us on, but I think the stated objective or purpose behind the review is really important. And for me, the review would not be, oh, well, let's just throw all of our ideas up in the air about who gets to buy what. It's more understanding and deciding what are the conditions surrounding which we would consider an exception, which is very, very different from, hey, if you've got this and this, it means you can only buy half. And if you've got, you know, it's a very, very different purpose, and how things would be laid out in the policy would be very different. So I think that's key moving ahead.
Yeah, I do too. And yeah, conditions, parameters, criteria, thresholds, all of those things that allow council a more detailed decision-making exception process than just saying, yeah, as you say, throw it all up in the air and see what lands. So go ahead.
Much the same as what Councillor Dayu is saying. I think we have to be very careful about the criteria and you know, that it maybe it's with respect to a unique piece of land more than like affordability. To me, it's unfortunate, but I just think about the people that have already, and I mean, I know that there's been people that have paid over $100,000 for their shore road allowance, and we didn't give them any consideration at all. And that cannot be the deciding factor here, or shouldn't be, in my mind. I know it is a unique piece of property, but I think we just need to be careful with the criteria of, you know, what we're going to consider in a policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind too, that staff could you know, work on a report and bring it back and say, here's what I can reasonably offer for council's consideration, and council could look at that and say, yeah, we're not going to do that. So just because there is a staff review of something doesn't mean it's going to change. It means we're asking how it could change and what that looks like for us and for the best interest. So, you know, reasonable minds prevail, the council of reasonable people. Okay, that's where we've landed. So we'll have a resolution.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 5322 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of Lot 4, Concession 10, Geographic Township of McClintock, Hawkstone Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callaghan, dated April 7, 2022. The council sets aside the shoreline road allowance closing policy and authorizes a partial closure in accordance with the draft plan submitted by the applicants. And further, the council directs staff to conduct a review of the shoreline road allowance closing policy.
All in favor? That is carried. Opposed? That's carried. And finally, there's just the minutes from the last committee of adjustment. We have a resolution for that.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives report PL 5422 regarding the March 25th, 2022 Committee of Adjustment minutes submitted by Sean O'Callaghan, dated April 7th, 2022.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. External boards, I don't really know, I'm just gonna, with an eye to the list, have any members of these external boards been advised of these groups reconvening? Councillor Dayu?
Yes, the Health Hub is going to be reconvened at the beginning of May.
Great. Anything from you, Councillor Barry, about the Watershed Council? No. Safety and well-being, that there's something coming back to the county table. We did have a conversation around the the composition of the detachment boards and whatnot, but what we didn't talk about is how the appointments are going to be made. So that's coming back to the county table at some point for that committee to, the advisory committee to have another look at that. The library board, did you want anything from there that you can remember that you want to say?
No, other than the fact that there was some concern about the ability to pick up books from the library, and that's been handled, and the library board has been advised based on the CAO's regular Friday report.
Yeah,
and
those
update.
are quite good.
So they're really
Um,
happy about that.
Yeah, they are. Yep. Eorn, anything from Eorn? And Muskoka Watershed Communications, there is a meeting coming up. That's about it. Next is correspondence. Nothing was moved forward. And there is a resolution to receive the summary listing.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives the April 7th, 2022 correspondence listing for information.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, our next item is closed session, but I think we're going to break for lunch, a bit of an early lunch to accommodate one of the aspects of the closed session. Do you want us to go in now and then break? Okay, so we will now recess for lunch. Early lunch. Thank you. Thank you. We are back live, and we are going to move into closed session, and we have a resolution to do so.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, council adjourns its open session at 12:08 PM to proceed into closed session to discuss matters pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 SO 2001 as amended, pertaining to 1, personal matters about identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, in accordance with section 239(2)B, personnel matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, in accordance with section 239(2)B, candidates for appointment to committee, and 3, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals and advice subject to solicitor-client privilege in accordance with sections 239E and F.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, council hereby adjourns its closed session at 1:23 PM and open session resume.
All in favor? That's carried. We have a resolution for the bylaws.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, the following bylaws be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. Bylaw 2022-34, being a bylaw to stop up close part of the original shore road allowance in front of lot 26, concession 2, geographic township of McClintock Barnes. Bylaw 2022-36, being a bylaw to stop up close convey part of the original shore road allowance in front of lot 6, concession 10, geographic township of Stanhope, Kabakwa Lake. Bylaw 2022-37, being a bylaw to stop, close up, convey part of the shore road allowance in front of lot 21, concession 4, geographic township of Stanhope, Beach Lake. Bylaw 2022-38, being a bylaw to stop, up, close, and convey part of the original shore road allowance in front of lot 5, concession 8, geographic township of Stanhope, Lower Welch Lake. Bylaw 2022-39, being a bylaw to stop, up, close part of the original shore road allowance in front of lot 20, concession 12, geographic township of Sherburne, Kawagama Lake. Bylaw 2022-40, being a bylaw to stop, up, close, and convey part of the original shore road allowance In front of lot 15, concession 8, geographic township of Stanhope Falls Lake, bylaw 2022-41, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement between the corporation of the Township of Algonquin Highlands and Tulloch Engineering, Inc. for the provisions of consulting services for the rehabilitation of Lower Fletcher Lake Landing Project, and bylaw 2022-42, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an amending agreement between the corporation of the Township of Algonquin Highlands and Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Canada as represented by the Minister of Employment and Social Development.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have a resolution for the confirmatory bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Jansen, second by Councillor Dayu, be it resolved that bylaw 2022-43, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its April 7th, 2022 regular meeting, be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? Carried. And adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Deputy Mayor Jansen, be it resolved that the April 7th, 2022 regular council meeting is hereby adjourned at 1:26 PM.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.